Hey guys, today's interview is with Dom Holland of Fast.co. Fast recently raised $102 million from Addition, as well as the corporate venture arm of Stripe. And so we're going to talk about how he did that. Dom also has a great tale of how he cracked into Silicon Valley, how he came here from Australia, and how he built out his network of relationships here. And that was really pretty fundamental in helping him raise capital. So let's get into that. If you like this kind of content, leave us a nice review in the Apple iTunes store, and then email me info@foundersuite.com, and I will send you a list of 500 of the most active corporate VCs. So if you're thinking about raising money from a corporate VC or strategic investor, this is a great list to have. So leave us a nice review in the Apple iTunes store, hit all the stars, please, and then email us info@foundersuite.com, and I will send you that list. Until then, sit back, enjoy the interview with Dom.
Welcome to How I Raised It, the podcast that goes behind the scenes with entrepreneurs who've raised capital. We uncover the tips, tricks, and techniques they use to get investors to write a check. Strap in and turn it up.
Hi, welcome to another episode of How I Raised It, produced by foundersuite.com. Today I have Dom Holland of Fast coming to us from San Francisco. How's your day going?
Fantastic. Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. Glad you could make it. I know you guys are probably pretty busy right now with having just raised a big round. So let's talk about what it is you guys do. What is Fast?
Sure. So Fast is a one-click checkout for the entire internet with no passwords. So it's a button that says Fast Checkout that e-commerce sites put throughout their store. They put it on product pages, cart pages, checkout pages. When you click it, you instantly buy whatever it is you're looking at, whether it's the product that you're currently looking at or an entire cart of items.
Okay, that makes sense. So this is instead of having the merchant having to build this themselves, or it's kind of, I guess, what's the sort of argument for having you guys be part of the process? And I'm assuming you're taking some chunk of revenue or, some other expenses there. So.
Yeah. So, stores spend a long time optimizing checkout, right? E-commerce stores, checkout is the largest friction point of any e-commerce transaction. They spend a long time sort of optimizing their checkout form. A store can only optimize their checkout form so much, right? Is that the reality is the best type of checkout form is no checkout form. And,
Sure.
And the reality is the only way you can do that is by leveraging a cross-site network, right? So if somebody checks out on one store once using Fast Checkout, they get one-click checkout to the rest of the internet. They don't have to type their name again, their email again, their delivery address again. It's we already have that information from the previous checkout, right? That is the best experience for a person. That's the easiest way to buy online, is not having to fill in the information again. A store can't build that themselves because they have to leverage this sort of cross-site network. And so we act as that cross-site network for them that makes checkout more frictionless for their customers. And if you make it easy for people to buy things, more people will buy things. So it's a really simple proposition for sellers, and it just makes life easier for buyers. Yeah.
Makes sense. I think I saw it likened somewhere to Amazon's buy it now or one-click checkout. I guess that's kind of the analogy there.
Yes. So Amazon has this sort of feature for themselves, right? Just within their own site. And they built that, but Amazon also has the vast majority of the population sort of, already tokenized in their database. And so it makes sense. And they act as a huge, cross-merchant platform. So it is similar sort of scale, but we do it for the rest of the internet, essentially. Yeah.
Got it. What's the backstory? How'd you come up with this idea? It's like many folks on this show, it's sort of obvious or intuitive or seemingly simple and intuitive in hindsight, but where did you come up with this idea? Yeah.
Yes. So I'm married to 2 little kids, and my youngest son, Coda, was in hospital for a couple of weeks, or for 3 weeks, actually. And we had my wife's grandmother staying with us and helping us out because my wife or I was at hospital 24 hours a day. We had to look after our daughter as well, and just having some extra help around the house. And one night she was sitting at the kitchen table ordering groceries online. She forgot her password and just couldn't check out, right? She just couldn't buy groceries. I just remember thinking it was preposterous to see this little old lady sitting at the kitchen bench, purse out, just unable to order food online, spend money on a credit card. It just defied belief that some arbitrary string of text was like some blocker to commerce. And so I actually set out and I built prototype of a passwordless authentication system. But the idea was you authenticate yourself once on one site using a magic link or a link that we send you on email. Click the link. We know that it's your email address. You're authenticated. We'll log you in. You don't need a password. But then every other site can just have one-click login because you've already authenticated. There's no point in making you do that for every site. And the reality is that like passwords don't scale, right? It doesn't make sense for us to have an individual password for every single site we go to. And so, I had tens of thousands of people use it within 24 hours of launching the prototype on Product Hunt. And it made sense. The thing I realized was that I think the world, agreed with my sort of view that the current sort of status of the internet, of this like disaggregated way that we manage identity and personal information and security and authentication just doesn't make sense. And it adds friction, and it's literally blocking people from, transacting online or just engaging online. And so, solve that. And checkout is just like a larger version of that concept, right? So why create a new profile, a new authentication token for every site? Why create it, or have to re-enter the same information again? I'm 34 years old. Why do I have to keep typing my name and date of birth as if it's brand new information? And so, that's where Fast came from.
Where were you working before? What were you doing?
Yeah, so I had a bootstrap company before that I ran for 4 years, ended up shutting it down, but it was an on-demand towing platform. We actually did $50 million revenue in 4 years, even being bootstrapped.
On-demand, what was that? On-demand what?
Towing, car towing.
Oh, car towing. Okay, that's what I thought you said. But I'm like,
yes, okay. Yeah. Yeah, which is the natural gateway into checkout technology.
Absolutely.
So,
Was this like so? Sorry to interrupt. Was this like Uber for tow trucks or something like that, or kind of someone's blocking my driveway?
Similar concept. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
A lot of our clients were like government and corporations. Most car towing is an interesting sector where most of the work is paid for by someone else who organizes the work, right? So if you're broken down on the side of the road, you might call AAA or something like that, and AAA pays for the tow, but it's the person who organizes the tow truck. Same thing is when you're in an accident, the police might organize the tow for the car, but it's paid for by the insurance company. And so a lot of towing is kind of siphoned into these aggregated areas, yet it's still it's probably one of the most fragmented industries in the world, where, in Australia, there's 5,000 independent towing companies, all this aggregated. In the US, it's likely, much more than that. So it's an interesting area.
This is going a little bit off the topic of the show, but did you sell that? Did you just shut it down because it wasn't working? Or did you come up with the idea for Fast and you're like, this is a much better idea, I'm just going to jump all the way into Fast?
Shut it down. We ran out of money. Despite doing $50 million revenue, it's still, it's nature of the beast. And we ran out of money in that business. Yeah, unfortunately.
Interesting. The market is just too fragmented, too tough to crack, or I don't know. There's probably multiple reasons.
Yeah, it's a really hard market. There's also natural market conditions that not necessarily looking for aggregation and different parts of the market that are actively sort of pushing against that. There was issues with government regulations, and there's a really it's a really complex industry. Yeah, it's horrible, to be honest. And I'll tell you what, I spoke with executives at major insurers who are kind of it is horrific. It costs us a fortune. We hate car towing. It's crazy, but we're kind of just hoping that autonomous vehicles takes care of them, care of it for us, and we can just ignore the problem. So, it's a really fascinating space, but it's just one. I also wasn't it wasn't my passion to spend the next 10 years really trying to die on that hill and fix this sector that has much more sort of intricate problems.
Probably an interesting customer base to deal with too. Or at least I think of tow truck companies as I've only been towed maybe twice in my life, but kind of semi-sleazy, getting into the gray area of a little
much
bit
different to D2C fashion companies. Yeah, I'll tell you that. Yeah.
Interesting. Cool.
Yeah.
Good. Well, let's talk about raising money for Fast. So how much you guys raised? How many rounds? Over how many rounds?
Yeah. So we've raised about $124 million US dollars over So we've raised 3 institutional rounds, and we did a sort of angel, friends, and family round originally. You probably have no idea, but I'm Australian, hence the funny accent. And so I raised a friends, family, angel round in Australia before I first got to the States. I raised a $600,000 Australian dollar, which is about 400,000 American dollar, angel round from high net worths in Australia, and then I got to the US. That was in May 2019. I got to the US in June 2019. Sort of start building networks, and I raised a $2.5 million pre-seed round in September, October 2019 , and that was actually a preempted round. So I wasn't formally sort of fundraising at the time, but that round was led by Index Ventures, and then in March 2020 we announced a $20 million Series A led by Stripe, and we just recently last month announced a $102 million Series B led by Stripe and Addition.
Stripe and who?
Addition. So the general partner there is Lee Fixel, and the used to be Tiger Capital, and really phenomenal investor. Yeah.
So did you start Fast in Australia, and then is that why you raised money from, or you just had a network there, or what?
So I was in Australia when I first incorporated Fast. Always intended to be based the company in the US. I incorporated it as a Delaware C Corp from day one, actually using Stripe Atlas. And so then I used, then I raised an angel round in Australia before leaving. So about a week after closing the angel round, I got the next flight to the US. So always intended to base the company here, just obviously leveraged existing networks and raised a little bit of capital before I came. Yeah.
Was the tow truck company based in Australia or US?
In Australia. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So maybe let's just touch on that for a minute. We've had 1 or 2 Aussies on the show, but what's it like raising money in Australia? Is it, any interesting nuances to that, or, or these are just friends of yours that cut a bunch of checks? Yeah.
Australia is a lot more conservative than the US. In the types of businesses that they back, scale of businesses that they back, the amount of capital that's available. Obviously it's a much smaller market than the US, and so naturally there's just a lot less capital available. And but I do find that the types of companies that get funded are typically different to the types of companies here that get funded. We saw it's sort of strong startup sector, but because we haven't had the a whole stream of the Facebook, Googles, returns of the world, we don't have a VC sector that can invest like the VC sector here can, having seen, what massive exits look like, right? And what huge VC returns look like. And so because of that, they can't, or they just naturally don't be as aggressive in chasing large sort of really high risk, high reward opportunities like they do in the US. And so I think you typically see lower risk, lower reward VC type deals in Australia.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool. Good. So you raised that friends and family money, and then I think you mentioned you launched on Product Hunt. So was that after the angel round or that friends and family round, or what?
Yes. Yeah, it was about the same time, roughly. Yeah.
And any just anecdotes from that? How did that go? That's always we did some Product Hunt launches like years ago, and it actually had a pretty positive effect. I'd be curious what it's like these days. Did you have to, strategize all, or you just kind of put it up there? Yeah.
Kind of just put it up there. Huge amounts of traffic. It is a really incredible platform. Obviously, it's been a little while now. We haven't launched Product Hunt for some time now. But it was a really incredible starting ground for us. I do think that for indie makers or for startups launching, it is a great launch pad. It's a really good way to get eyeballs, looking at product initially, test the market, see what the market thinks about concepts. It's a really great platform. Yeah.
Did it lead to any kind of connecting the dots between your different rounds? Did it lead to any investor interest? And really my next question is, you mentioned the pre-seed round. Index preemptively led it. So maybe if there's no connection to the product and launch, that's fine. But maybe talk about how a preemptive round kind of came together, because that's everyone's dream, right?
Yeah. So we Product Hunt didn't lead directly to an investment, but I will say that it probably did increase investor awareness. It was really a way that a lot of investors came across us, reached out in general, and as well as clients, like large corporates interested in authentication technology or login technology or sort of network SSOs. So we definitely did get a lot of inbound, not just like random users kind of testing the product, but really is a great exposure to like lots of different demographics of potential customers, suppliers, or investors, and so forth.
Interesting.
But
okay.
In terms of index, so when I first got to the States, I wanted to build networks, right? I didn't really know anyone here in the Bay Area. I knew I wanted to base business here, and I wanted to build networks. And so I spent a lot of time reaching out and just to relevant people, right? People working in payments, people working in technology, people working in identity or authentication, just really relevant people in the space, working in big tech who built large scale networks or were building large scale networks. And one of the people was Allen, who she was running head of global product operations at Uber in Uber's money team. Uber has one of the largest financial services divisions of any business. You can imagine every single time somebody orders Uber Eats or takes an Uber, there's money going in and then there's money flowing out to different people. So it's a huge financial services operation. And she was just a really relevant person. She also is an angel investor. I had literally just raised money, so I wasn't looking for money, but just somebody who's obviously interested in startups and the space. So I thought it would be a good person to talk to. I caught up with her, and I just reached out cold and sent her a DM, and we caught up for coffee. And told her about what I was building and what I wanted to build, and she was really interested in the space. She had already written a thesis about like basically the exact business that we're building, and she wanted to angel invest in the company, and she also asked if she can introduce me to some VCs, and I said sure. One of them, in fact, the first one that she introduced me to was Jan Hammer at Index Ventures, and Jan is actually based in London, and he came over to the US. He comes over to the US frequently, or at least pre-COVID days, and he came over on Labor Day, America's Labor Day in 2019, and we caught up for breakfast for the first time. I don't think he'd even seen a deck, and we had breakfast, and he made an offer on the spot to lead a pre-seed round. Really just understood exactly what we were doing and building, so it was and so I went back to Alison and said, rather than angel invest in the company, why don't you join and help build it? And she said yes. And so she's joined as a co-founder, and we've been building the company since.
That's amazing. That's great. Do you think Jan had done a lot of digging and research into you guys before that? Or was it more of a, hey, I'm just a gut feel, I'm liking what you're doing, here's an offer? Like, what do you think was it? Because that's again everyone's dream.
Yeah. So Jan knows the space incredibly well. Yeah. He's ranked as, I think, the number one fintech investor in at least Europe, maybe the world. He's a phenomenal investor, very well versed. He's backed incredible companies like Coinbase, Robinhood, TransferWise. Sorry, not Coinbase, Robinhood, TransferWise, a number of others. He is super solid investor. Really understands the core problem set, what the consumer challenges, business challenges, the entire market, and globally, right? He's backed businesses all the leading fintechs all around the world, and so he knows the space really well, and hearing what we're building, I think he just he understood instantly how valuable this is, and how what we're doing impacts every single internet connected consumer in the world. And it's to your point, when you sort of hear what we're building, it kind of just makes sense, right? It's kind of like, why is that kind of a no-brainer that this is the way it should work? And that's right. And it's and I think that he had that same sense. He also he said since that he sensed I was a hungry immigrant founder that was going to go, work tirelessly to make it come true. And so I think we just, Jan is actually, he's from the Czech Republic originally, lives in London. We connected on a number of levels, and he sort of backed us instantly. Yeah.
That's great. Let's go back a little bit just on kind of building your network in the Bay Area? Because I think that's always an interesting story. We see
Sure.
time and time again. And, it sounds like you were cold emailing, reaching on LinkedIn. Like, was it, I guess here's the question to get to the question. Any tips for folks like yourselves coming from Australia, coming from wherever, kind of making their way into the Bay Area? Is it just identifying the right people and having a really crisp pitch, or sheer numbers of outreach, and some percent of those are going to respond, or any other tips for sort of cracking the network, right?
Yeah, look, hard work is like, it might seem like a cop-out answer, but this is the thing that I think some people don't necessarily realize, right? Is one, people want to raise money, but you can't just go and just ask people for money randomly, right? Is like, why would they give you money? I get emails all the time from founders just asking me to like invest in their company. One, I got no idea who they are. I got no idea what the product is. I got no idea if it's any good. Like they haven't given me any information. They've just asked for money, and I think that's a bad approach. I think, the thing that I did was I went out actually to not like, granted I might have just I also raised the angel round and that took work. But like, if you're taking like the pre-seed round or whatever else, the reality is I just spent time meeting with people in the sector, not asking for money, just interesting people who, just the network could help. Raising money isn't the only thing you've got to do. You got to hire people. You got to build a team. You got to build customers and suppliers, and like you've got to build entire ecosystems. And so anybody who would be interesting in that area, anyone I could learn from, anyone that would be helpful to me, I spent the time to meet, and I would have still do 10, 20 meetings a day. I would just put in the hard work. I would come to them. I would just ask for whatever time, and not necessarily ask for anything, but yet make really clear what it is you want to talk about that they would be interested in. Again, if somebody emails me because they've got a horticultural startup that they just want to like tell me about for 15 minutes, that really like has no relevance to me. I have no relevance to it. I couldn't add any real value to like their specific domain. So it's just not a great fit for me, right? Yet people who are in this area are very interested in, in that sector, and angel investors would be great people to reach out to. They'd probably be really interested in what you're building. And so like doing the groundwork to understand who are the types of people you should be meeting with, and then researching them, and then asking to, giving them some compelling reason about why it would be interesting to them to meet you, or why, that you could really learn from them, or something is a really great way to form connections. Yet I just think so many people take this like easygoing, some high profile founder or investor, and I'm just going to ask them to like for money or just to meet with no background at all. And like, it's just a bad, I mean, I get probably 10, 20 of these emails a day. And so like, you're just putting yourself in a bucket with everyone else that has done the same thing that like, I'm not, you're just not going to spend any time with. So I think hard work, I just plainly think, hard work is like the number one thing that people just need to do. They need to spend more time researching and, on bespoke communication as opposed to just kind of spray and pray. Totally.
100% agree. Doing the research, doing the bespoke communication, did you always have an ask? And like, what was, if you remember, what was your ask in that maybe cold outreach to Allison? Or, like what was the most common ask? Did you always have an ask? And was it always like, hey, I want to pick your brain about recruiting in fintech? Or, like what were some of those asks that you had?
Yeah. So I would typically, like, I could have a tiny little blurb. Again, I'm pretty time poor these days. So if somebody sends me this really long email, I just like plainly not going to read it. I just don't have the time typically, right? So understanding that is also a really key thing, is give people like short, condensed piece of information that they can easily consume. And then you've got a much larger chance of them like responding. For me, to be honest, when I first got here, I would say, hey, I'm an Aussie founder, just arrived here in SF. I'm building X, would love to tell you about it. And one, you're just kind of unusual because you've already told them like you're an Aussie founder here, so you're not like every other person here. That's like kind of interesting, in some wavelength. You're at least like differentiating yourself in some way. And then two, you've told them like a very specific example of what it is you're building, and you already know that that person is interested in this space, so they're more likely to be interested, right? This is why, like, you don't just reach out to anyone just for the sake of it to sort of ask them about your business, because they probably may not have any real interest in that area.
Yep.
And so, and I find that worked really well, right? I'd love to just tell you about it for 15 minutes over coffee. And I think I would always say coffee or a beer, because being Australian, I think people still found that humorous too. I mean, no one in the Bay Area drinks, but it was always coffee. But, and I just found that approach worked quite well. And a lot of people would meet, not everyone, but it definitely would have a pretty good reception. And that's not to say that you can't, and in the venture world, I met with lots of people who hadn't been thinking about authentication technology or checkout technology or payments or whatever else, but they're typically referrals, right? And this is where everyone that you meet, like people like Allison, right? I didn't ask her for introductions. I didn't ask her for to invest. I didn't ask her for any of these things. I just told her what I was doing. It was an area that she was like really interested in. And then she felt compelled to want to introduce me to other people, right? Yeah. Other angel investors, other venture capitalists. And this is a natural thing. Again, I get people cold emailing me, asking me to intro them to investors. And it's like, you've built no connection with a person first, and you're just making these hard asks that don't really make sense. And so, yeah, I think that's a really big, important piece.
There's a Canadian woman who had a great quote. It's like, you want an intro, but it has to go like this. I'm going to probably get it wrong, but it was like, first I need to know you, then like you, then trust you, then refer you. Or it might have been slightly different order, but it was kind of like the four phases prior to an intro. So.
I mean, the reality is, like, an intro is just worth nothing if it's not like given with context. I mean, I could intro somebody to someone, but like, I'm probably going to tell them I've got no idea who this person is. I've never seen their product. I've never seen whatever. Take it with a grain of salt. And they might not take it. They might take it and then just dismiss it right away. And so, but for me as well, like, you're asking me to leverage my network for somebody who I've got no connection with, and using up a time. What if the product is terrible? What if, like, I don't know you. I don't know your intention. So it's you've just got to build connections, right? You've just got to do that. And it's not necessarily going to be somebody who, again, I met with a lot of people who didn't necessarily add like immense value, but you don't know that unless you meet with people. And some people you'll form great connections, and some you won't. And like, that's just part of the process.
Good. No. Okay. To condense all this, and we can move on, but basically, doing the research, identifying the right people, having a really short kind of summary of what you're up to, some little teaser in there why it'd be interesting to take 15 minutes to talk to you. And then for you, interestingly, you didn't have a specific ask or you weren't always asking for referrals, but it just sort of happened naturally as people got to know what you're doing, basically.
I mean, the more relevant you are to the person, the less you need to give them an ask, right? It's like if there are two people that love football, right? The two of you can just talk about football generally. You don't need to have like a specific game in mind that they have to talk about football with you. They will just happily kind of talk, because it's just an area that they're both interested in, and I think that really helps. The other thing is, on this, I've spoken to people, like, I think a good example is people who are building, is just an example, but I've spoken to people who are building like legal startups, right? And they're like, it's been so hard fundraising, can you intro me to VCs or angels, or can you tell me like how I would, do it, or who I reach out to? And, I've had no success sort of doing this. And I'm like, have you spoken to, any lawyers about angel investing? And they're like, no, we haven't. I'm like, one, this is your core audience. These are like potential your customers. If anybody should understand what it is you're building, it should be them. And then two is, I know how much lawyers charge. They actually, they have some money behind them typically as a sector, and would make great angel investors. And, again, this is where it's like, this is just, to me, it's just the same work, right? If you're really talking to your customers, if you're really talking to your audience, if you're really talking to the network of people you should just be talking to as part of your business anyway, you're going to naturally see people who get excited about what you're doing, and they're going to want to invest or be part of it or join the team or like help or just give you connections to other people in the sector. And so I just can't sort of understate just building networks in the sector that you're operating in is a really important skill set.
Totally. Good. Excellent. Let's move on to, I guess, Stripe. Let's talk about Stripe. They did a $20 million round and then another more recent B round. How did you connect to Stripe? And obviously everyone, I think, knows what Stripe is. Did they reach out to you? Did you get plugged in with them? Kind of talk about that.
Stripe were actually one of the first groups of people I started speaking to when I arrived in the US, just by chance. So I had one contact in the US, or in the Bay Area, sort of before I got here, and it's Brian Sugar, he's now on our board. But I was introduced to Brian from Nick Molnar, who's the CEO of Afterpay, a big Australian fintech company. Brian's an advisor to Afterpay in the US, and I caught up with Brian for a beer in San Francisco when I sort of first arrived one night, and he asked if I'd chatted to Stripe, because the interesting overlap between, we're building products to make it easier for consumers to pay. Stripe builds products to make it easier for businesses to accept payments. A lot of overlap. And anyway, he texted, the brothers, the two founders of Stripe, then while we were having a beer, and we've been sort of talking to the company since, organised to meet up with their team, I think a week later, and have been chatting to them since sort of late 2019.
Wow, he connected you straight to the top, basically.
Yeah, but this is another really great example, right? Is that another investor that I didn't ask directly for an intro to. It was just someone who I built relationships. It was sitting down having a beer with somebody in San Francisco, no idea on who their networks were. That introed us to someone who is now two of our two rounds that we've raised, combined 120 million in those two rounds. Is a really great example of these networks, who will happily sort of leverage existing networks based on relationship. Yeah.
That's amazing. So let's go through that story. So he introduces you to the Stripe founders. Do they, say, come and have a meeting, or they kick you down to their venture team or
Yeah, met with their ventures team. They were out of town at the time, which is recent, but met with their ventures team, and I chatted with the ventures team for about a year. They didn't invest in a pre-seed round. To be honest, I didn't even try. They were just typically I just felt we were too early for a corporate venture capital money to sort of invest in the business. And we stayed in touch, and then about a year later, sort of started talking to them more seriously about the Series A that we were raising, and they ended up leading the round. Yeah.
So, question is, corporate venture. Talk about that for a sec. Stripe obviously is a juggernaut and doing awesome. We use them, but there's always that risk if you're taking money from a strategic like that you sort of lose a little independence working with. I'm not saying this is in your case, but oftentimes when you're taking money from a strategic, it sometimes can limit your range of optionality and stuff like that. Did any of that come into play, or was it just hey, Stripe's on a roll, let's jump on that wagon?
Look, I think it's all comes down to deal making, right? This is the types of deals that you do, and I think you can do a bad strategic deal, or you can do a good strategic deal. Is it that is the company going to increase your value or your growth or your market size, or are they going to limit it? Is kind of the two main things. And the type of deal is, by them coming in, are you excluding part of the market from working with you or not? And these are all the sort of questions you need to ask when looking at these types of deals. I think for us, Stripe is just a very complementary business and network. It's one of the largest sort of distribution opportunities for us on the internet. And they're a great partner, a really great team, and so very complimentary. But like I said, I think deal terms are really important, and making sure that as a business you have optionality, you have growth potential, you're not limiting that sort of scale. These are just important details to get right. Yeah.
You don't have to tell us the details, but what were maybe the top 3 deal terms that you were most keen on? Obviously, you don't have to tell us what you ended up negotiating, but what was sort of top of mind when negotiating?
Price, equity, they're the top 2. I think that I don't think this should be understated for founders that, if you're looking at venture deals, the number two, the first two things you need to be looking at is size of the amount of money and the valuation, right? Is because this is what dictates dilution, and it's really important, right, for you and our shareholders. And I think some people like to distract from those things. They're really important. They should be the first two things you look at. I'm not saying there aren't other things that come to mind, but they're the first two things that doesn't matter who is investing that you should be looking at. And the reality is that different investors will have different like non-price value, but I've met very few investors in my time that non-price value is significantly overweighted as to the actual price value.
Interesting.
And so I think founders need to make sure that they don't sort of get starry-eyed about that. And then there's sort of obviously deal terms between Stripe and us and partnership sort of deal terms that I can't sort of necessarily get into, but there's that we actually have a whole wide range of very exciting things that we're working on together that play into our overarching strategy as well.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. I won't keep you much longer. You've got a big business to run. Any just anecdotes from, the B round? Was that kind of a preemptive round too? I mean, Stripe is already investors, so they just said, hey, let's put in more money or what?
No, so we ran a process for our B round. We ran a process for our A and our B. I can tell you that again is, another common trait is just like this hard work is even, companies at our stage might really limit the number of people that they'll talk to at this stage, 8 or 9 companies or 8 or 9 funds, and sort of pick one and run with it. Already got a strong partner and just do that. We still met with somewhere between 70 and 100 people. I lost count, and just did the hard work. And luckily we had a lot of people who wanted to talk to us, which is great. But I think we really spend that time to talk to the market. It's a great way to make sure that we're aligned with the best partners and that we're getting strong terms and doing the best thing by all of our shareholders and our team and everyone else. And just take the time to do it. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. All right. Last question. If any other tips or advice for founders we haven't covered, just in terms of fundraising, or is there any advice you would give your younger self if you were doing this all over again?
Yeah. Again, number one advice is just hard work, and don't there's no easy options. There's no mass list you can buy of 2,000 investors you can send an email to and then they just suddenly all invest. That's just not how it works. And plus, think about how many millions of other people around the world are trying to do the exact same thing as you, right? Nothing beats building human networks. It's just that's just the way that you're going to get this done in terms of fundraising. But it also bearing in mind that showing that you can do that is also showing that you can build the business, because that's what you've got to do to build a client base. It's what you've got to do to build a team. These are just important traits that you need to show that you can successfully execute on.
Totally. I get that all the time. People coming on Founder Suite and they're like, I just want to, send out my deck to your entire database of investors. And it's just not how it works. I have to explain this again.
Yeah. And the deck isn't what they're investing in. The deck is to, maybe add more color or maybe, articulate a reason why they should meet with you. But the deck is just not what's going to close your deal and should be relied upon like that. We've had lots of investors invest without seeing a deck. It really you need to be able to explain that vision very clearly, answer every question. You need to know your space backwards, know your competitors backwards. You just need to do the research. Yeah,
totally. If people want to learn more, what is the URL? It's
fast.co, fast.co.
Fast.co. Got it. Excellent. Anything you want to promote or plug, or any open job recs, or just people?
Sure.
Yeah.
Hiring right across the company. So go to fast.co/careers. We'd absolutely love to hear from great people, always expanding that team. And also, if you've got an e-commerce site, if you've got a site that you want to have one-click login or one-click checkout, then go to fast.co/sellers, or just fast.co and have a look. We'd love to have Fast on your site. And if not, if you're a human being who uses the internet, then just go to fast.co and register, and then you can have one-click checkout and one-click login for the whole internet.
Oh, cool. For the hiring, are you guys distributed? Are you centralized in San Francisco or what?
Fully distributed now. Yeah, we were centralized in San Francisco pre-COVID. Obviously, fully distributed now. and permanently. Yeah. So we have fast flex. You can work from your home, from our office, from the beach, wherever you like, and it's perfectly fine. Yeah.
You're making it permanently distributed?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we did virtually from day one. So we got a policy called Fast Flex, which means you can literally just, you can move country, you can move city, you can, holiday for 4 weeks somewhere else and just work out of an Airbnb. It's perfectly fine. And we have people who do this. Our VP of engineering went from Mountain View to Turkey 6 months ago. We've got a staff member who's been on a road trip for the last 9 months or something. We absolutely buy this. Yeah.
What a cool world it is that we live in. I mean, obviously there are some issues right now too with it, but just the fact that you could be on a road trip and working at a hot, fast Silicon Valley startup, really cool. Did you get rid of your SF office space, or do you have some?
No, still got the office space. And I do think that this is part of the thing is some people like to work out of an office, and once they have the ability to do so, they'll do so again. We want to give that optionality to people. I think that this is going to be like the second wave of WeWork. I think we're going to see a lot of more WeWork competitors come up. I think that co-working spaces are going to be this is their era, because I think the fact that people don't live near a headquarters or a company headquarters or whatever doesn't mean that they like to work from home. Or doesn't mean that they don't have distractions at home, or want a better desk or better resource. And so I definitely think that there's going to be some people like to work from home, but I think having that optionality that flexibility is really important, and something we'll see a lot more of. Yeah.
Dom, thank you very, very much. This is super fun and interesting. And we'll catch you after your Series C round and see how things have changed. All right. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Over and out.
Bye.
Bye.